Hello everyone, today we're testing the J37 tape from Arturia and I wanted to see if there is any advantage to using this tape machine. So advantage over the others, sure. I think it would be really hard to compare aside of putting this one and let's say another one close to it like the Waves 37, J37 emulation into a plug-in doctor and seeing how different the harmonics are. I don't think that's showing us anything. Someone might like this one better or the other one. So I just want to see if there is any advantage to actually paying $99 for this tape machine. I just want to see how good it is with the first something I throw at it, which would honestly be the way I would test any plugin. Try a couple of things on it, and if I like it, usually it's considered like buy it or not. And there are things in here that you could miss. So when you open this tape machine, first of all, you can go into the advanced setting and just see what the advanced setting is showing you. I think it would be really cool if this was on by default, because I think it's important. This part of the settings is really important in my opinion, at least. So I think this should be visible at all times. There is a cool feature I like in this tape machine, and we'll get to that in the end. If you want to learn more about tape machines and how all of this like emulation stuff works on computers, you can go ahead and go to mixingacademy.com. I have a free course there thanks to 11.org, so go check it out. Going to this tape machine, like any other, you have some really basic controls over this one. So these are 4 different types of saturation, and then you have the drive, which controls how much saturation we are applying. It is controlling the input and the output at the same time, from what I could see, and I did test this out by using some parallel chains just to see how it nulls. So this is basically controlling the input and the output at the same time to see how much you're going to be saturating the signal. There is a thing here, because being at 0, if your nominal input is too high, there is nowhere to lower it, so it just stays like that, the way it is. So you would have to lower that by using some sort of, utility plugin before this tape machine. As I remember in the Waves one, you have the input and the output separated so you can lower the input. Here, I don't see you can go any lower than, 0 drive. The only way this drive can go is plus. Now, aside of these 4 different types of saturation, which do apply different kinds of saturation and do apply different kind of an EQ curve onto your signal, you can use this modern switch, which basically flattens out that EQ response a tiny bit. Because this does cut off the lows and the highs a tiny bit, this modern actually prevents it from doing that. And while not cutting the high and the low frequencies, it also avoids some of the bumps that happen in the low frequencies when doing that cut, which is typical of a tape machine. But when you click on this modern button right here, it reduces that effect. Again, it does apply an EQ curve even with this modern setting on. After that, we have the speed, which controls the speed of the tape. It's basically shifting that entire EQ curve left and right in the spectrum. You have the start and stop for the music so that you can make your tape machine stop and start with maybe some, tape effect, tape stop effect. And again, that's basically all of the settings that are in the main screen without the advanced. Of course, you have the VU meter, and you have some of the additional settings on the bottom right here, so you can stop the animation, you can choose the oversampling quality, and you can use the stereo offset on and off. So using that stereo offset button, it just allows you to have a tiny bit of instability and difference between the left and the right channel. And then when you turn on the advanced, some EQing, some calibration, delay loop. Now, what was super interesting to me here was this EQ. Now, you can have the, mode be a pre or a post EQ. So the EQ can be applied before the tape machine, before the saturation, or can be applied after saturation. But the most important one, and I think the most interesting one, is going to be the emphasis mode. When we are in the emphasis mode, whatever you do with this EQ is applied so pre-saturation, but then the flipped opposite of that is applied post, meaning that you can push some frequencies more or less into the saturation before saturation, and then after saturation, invert that EQ curve, getting your signal to be flat, like it was never touched with an EQ. It's just that the saturation was applied onto a signal that was not flat. Now that feature I think is really, really interesting. I have not found that too much in many other, tape machine emulations. You do have it present in some saturators. You can apply something like that by using an EQ before and after your saturation device, whatever it may be, like, Saturn or whatever you're using. It does, let's say, appear in that Waves saturator from Abbey Roads. So that one has that pre and post emphasis EQ curve. This is really interesting, and I'll tell you why. It's a really nice and of course subtle effect for, let's say, mastering, because that's the main thing I do. So for me, it's really important that I can actually push a tiny bit more of the mids, maybe a tiny bit less of the highs, just like that, into that saturation, and when it comes out, that's de-emphasized automatically. So I don't have to, you know, fool around with two EQs that I have to connect into a specific processing chain in Ableton, which is not hard to do. You can do it, but this is actually, you know, right there with the plugin. So if you're not using Ableton Live, or let's say Bitwig, that can create all of that concoction of like a, you know, a container with multiple serial and parallel plugins and chains inside of it, then this is a really nice option. So let me play to you what that sounds like with just, you know, minimum saturation with the modern mode. Let's just see what we can do with it and see if that signal is too loud for that saturation tape. Thank God this is just enough. It's not too much. I would feel that this is okay. Let's say somewhere where the signal is a tiny bit louder.
And makes it all that there is.
I think I'll even boost it up a tiny bit. I can hear it distorting. More subtle. Let's see bypass that. Okay, that's cool. So let's try the same thing. We had that saturation applied, but let's try the same thing with that pre and post emphasis EQ. So what I'm going to try is going to be that EQ on and off with that saturation applied. So let's see what it sounds like with that saturation. Okay, now let's do it with the EQ. I really love this emphasis, de-emphasis, you know, trick with the tape machines, because it really pushes these mid frequencies where all the synths are, you know, parts of the drums, where some parts of these transients also are. It just pushes that into the tape more than the rest of the signal, and then applies an inverse EQ curve after the saturation has been applied. So we get somewhat a flat signal where saturation has been added to the entire signal, but mostly it was pushed by the frequencies that were emphasized when pushing into that saturation. So it does give you a really different result than the result when just pushing a flat signal into saturation. And it's also a really different result than just doing something multi-band. Okay, so this is not a multi-band distortion where you're just applying, you know, some saturation onto, let's say, the mid frequencies alone. That's not what's happening. Okay, so this is a different effect. At least it sounds to me always like a different effect. This sounds more subtle, more musical to me, more natural than doing the multi-band thing. So the emphasis and de-emphasis EQ before and after the saturation is great. And I feel that this being applied within the machine itself is great. Is it worth the extra money going from the Waves tape machine? I'm not really sure. Like, these colors really sound nice. Let's try some other ones. I'll have to reduce the amount of drive. Okay, so I have reached the limited time amount for this demo mode. I just have to reload this plugin. So I'll try to apply the same kind of curve, maybe even boost these mids even more. Okay, so with this higher saturation color, I can feel like it's eating up into my transient, so I would, for mastering purposes, really have to apply this quite lower, at least on this source material. Doesn't mean that it's going to be the same on everything. Maybe some, songs would suffer a lot less from adding even more saturation, more color. That's crazy great. Okay, I am overdoing this EQ, but I'm doing that on purpose to show you the difference, so you can feel the difference. Honestly, wouldn't push so much. I think it's like just messing up the amount of, transits cutting out and the amount of reverbs it's pushing up as well in that song when I do this. But it really feels more open. So just doing this a tiny bit, just using some emphasis and de-emphasis EQ is great. So that alone, as I said, I think it's enough to get you to use this tape. I think the colors are fine. They sound good with the modern or without it. They sound good even with that EQ curve, cutting off the lows and the highs and, giving you that low bump and EQ curve in the low frequencies. I think it's also fine. Yeah. It makes the song more saturated, basically more dense. The signal is more dense. How much do you want that for the source signal is definitely up to taste and need. I do like the way this sounds. I like the saturations. Is it worth the 3 times the money than the Waves one? I'm really not sure. If you already have an EQ, and you probably do, and if you are using Ableton or Bitwig, you can just pass just as good, I think, with the Waves one. I think it has even more options than this one. Creating an emphasis and de-emphasis EQ like on this one is, I think, a cheaper solution. I do like the way this sounds. Who knows how much, they've done in the background, how much this algorithm is complex, maybe more complex than the one in the Waves, plugin. I'm not sure. I can't say for certain. I'm just guessing. I think this is a great thing to have all in one. Load it up, have a preset, and I think that in this, you see tape has like a mid focus. You see, mid focus is basically boosting tiny bit of the mids, removing some of the lows and the highs, and just like adding some distortion. Of course, it's not expecting this signal to be as loud as it is, and the preset is adding a bit of noise as well and some of instability too. I'm not sure how much I'm into that on masters, maybe for a single channel, but on masters, no. Just as well, this delay loop, just having some of that delay in there, no, I don't want anything degrading or like messing with my signal. Just being on the mastering side, that would be too much of an unsubtle change to my mastering. But using something like this without those wow and flutter effects, that will be just enough. Just some saturation with some pre and post emphasis EQ, and that's it. So if you want to learn more about music production in detail, go to mixingacademy.com. I have a course there that's 40+ hours long. It's completely free thanks to 11.org, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.